The cemetery should have been a place of silence, but silence never lasts when secrets refuse to stay buried. The white tents shivered in the restless wind, their corners snapping like anxious hands. Beneath them, mourners dressed head to toe in black clung to handkerchiefs and whispered prayers, their eyes fixed on the golden casket that hovered above a raw, open grave. Inside lay Judith Anderson, billionaire, visionary, queen of glass towers that ruled Victoria Island. Or so everyone thought. Her husband, Williams, stood tall beside the casket. A folded handkerchief trembled in his grip, his eyes glistening with the kind of tears that looked too carefully rehearsed. A pastor cleared his throat, lifting his Bible, ready to guide her into the earth. Two grave workers bent forward, hands steady on the ropes. And then, stop! The word cracked across the air like thunder. Heads jerked. Phones lifted to record. The sea of mourners turned, horrified, as a man in a ragged brown coat pushed through the crowd. His beard was overgrown, tangled, his hair wild as if torn by storms. A heavy bag bounced against his shoulder, it seemed stretched with the scraps of a broken life. People recoiled, whispering, "A madman, a beggar." But the man's eyes blazed with something sharper than madness. He raised his trembling hand and pointed at the coffin. "She is not dead. Don't bury her." The tents went still, the air thick with disbelief. William's face tightened, his voice snapping like a whip. "Who are you to speak here? Guards, remove him. My wife is gone. She deserves peace." But the stranger did not move. He lifted his chin, and though his coat flapped like torn wings, his voice was unshaken. "My name is Benjamin, and I tell you the truth, Judith lives. She was given something, a substance that fools the body. It slows the breath. It chills the skin. It makes the living look dead. But she is not gone. She can be brought back, if you give her the neutralizer." A murmur rippled through the mourners, disbelief fighting curiosity. "Neutralizer?" someone whispered. "Is he insane?" Another hissed, though their phone stayed raised, recording. Williams stepped forward, fury trembling on his lips. "Enough. Continue the service." But Benjamin's voice softened when his gaze fell on Judith's still face. "Madam, hold on," he whispered, almost to himself. Then louder, "Check her mouth. Touch her wrist. She is warm." I heard them speak of quick burial, Williams and Dr. David. He signed her death, knowing the truth. Gasps swept through the crowd. Eyes darted to Dr. David, the family doctor, who stood stiff, his stethoscope buried deep in his pocket. His lips pressed into a thin line, as if sealing away words that could shatter everything. And then, from the front row, a trembling voice broke the spell. "If there is even the smallest chance," Judith's aunt, her lace gown quivering with her shaking hands, stepped forward. "We must check." Williams barked, "No." His forehead shone with sweat. The doctor confirmed it. "She is gone." But the crowd was shifting. Nods spread. Whispers turned into demands. "Let them check. What harm will it do?" The guards faltered. All eyes burned on Williams. Benjamin knelt by the coffin, dropping his tattered bag onto the grass. With gentle reverence, he removed his coat, folding it into a pillow. "Help me lift her a little," he begged. "She only needs air." For a heartbeat, no one moved. And then, Judith's aunt stepped closer. "I am her blood. If there is one small thing we can do, we will do it." Together, mourners lifted Judith just enough to rest her head on the coat. Up close, her face looked peaceful, almost asleep. Benjamin whispered urgently, "Remove the cotton from her nose." The aunt's trembling fingers pulled it free. Benjamin reached into his bag and lifted a tiny brown vial, scarred from years of travel. The glass caught the light, glowing like hope itself. "This will call her back," he said, his voice trembling. "No." Williams lunged forward, but two men stepped in his way. "Let him try," someone shouted. "If it fails, we bury," another added. "But if it works—" The silence deepened. Benjamin uncorked the vial, drawing a single drop into the glass pipette. "Please, help me open her mouth." Judith's aunt slid a finger gently at the corner of her lips. The young man in black steadied her body. Benjamin leaned close, holding the dropper above her tongue. His whisper was barely a prayer. "Come back, madam. Come back." The drop fell. For a moment, nothing. The crowd leaned in. Benjamin's lips counted under his breath. 1, 2, 3. Nothing. 4, 5. The tents shuddered with wind. Benjamin's hand shook as he raised the dropper for another attempt. "Don't you dare!" Williams roared. His voice cracked, but Benjamin squeezed again. The second drop slid down, and then a faint sound rose from Judith's chest. A whisper of air, a cough, so soft it could have been wind. But it was not. Her lips parted. Her throat moved. The cemetery erupted in chaos. Screams, gasps, prayers collided in the air as people surged forward, phones flashing, voices breaking. Judith's hand twitched. Another cough burst from her throat. And as her chest lifted, slow, weak, undeniable, the world shattered into disbelief. "She's alive," her aunt cried, clutching her wrist. "She is warm." Benjamin's eyes filled with fire. "I told you. She breathes." But William's face twisted with horror. His hand dove into his jacket. A flash of metal gleamed in the sunlight. The crowd recoiled in terror. And Judith, weak, broken, but alive, stirred, her lips trembling as her eyes fluttered open. Her whisper cracked the silence, fragile yet filled with pain. "Williams, why?" The syringe clattered to the ground. Guards wrestled him to the dirt as chaos swirled, as prayers rose, as Judith, rescued from death itself, looked into the eyes of the stranger who had refused to let her die. And for the first time, Benjamin's ragged voice broke not with desperation, but with certainty. "I told you," he whispered. She was never gone. The courtroom had never seen such a crowd. Every seat was taken, every hallway choked with people leaning in, desperate to catch a glimpse of the woman who had risen from her own grave. Outside, television vans lined the streets, their satellite dishes pointed skyward as reporters whispered into microphones. The story had shaken the nation. Judith Anderson, billionaire, mother of an empire, was alive. Her husband and her doctor sat accused of conspiring to bury her alive. When she entered the courtroom, the atmosphere shifted. She no longer wore diamonds or pearls. Instead, a simple black gown draped over her figure. Her steps were unsteady, but her head was held high. Benjamin walked beside her, quiet but solid, his presence steadying her every move. Her aunt clung to her other side, whispering prayers under her breath. The crowd gasped as Judith took her seat in the front row. All eyes darted to the dock where Williams sat, pale and rigid, his lips curled into a mask of disdain. Gone was the grieving husband from the cemetery. What sat before them now was a man cornered. Beside him, Dr. David trembled, his hands wringing, his eyes glued to the floor. Sweat soaked his collar, and for once, his voice had abandoned him. The judge banged the gavel, her silver hair glinting beneath the lights. "This court is now in session. The case of the state versus Williams Anderson and Dr. David Afori." The prosecutor rose. His voice cut through the hushed hall like a blade. "My lord, this is not a simple matter of grief. This is the cold-blooded plot of a husband who sought to bury his wife alive, aided by a doctor who betrayed his oath. Their aim, billions in assets, companies that feed families across this nation. Were it not for the courage of one man, this wickedness would already lie sealed under the soil." All eyes fell on Benjamin. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his beard trimmed now, his coat washed, but his scars visible, etched deeper than cloth could cover. He looked down, his calloused fingers pressed tightly together. The prosecutor turned, pointing toward Williams. "Do you deny it? Do you deny giving your wife poison designed to mimic death? Do you deny instructing this doctor to pronounce her dead and rush her burial?" Williams leaned forward, his eyes cold, his voice like ice. "I deny everything. Lies spun by a beggar and a woman too weak to face her own body's failure. She was dying already. I accepted it." Gasps spread like wildfire. Judith shot to her feet, trembling, her voice cracking with rage. "You liar. Look at me, Williams. You put poison in my food. You forced my doctor to swear I was gone. You tried to bury me alive like garbage." The judge banged her gavel. "Order. Order in this court." But the air was electric. The prosecutor lifted a clear evidence bag containing a small vial. "My lord, this was recovered from the syringe at the grave. Analysis proves it to be a paralytic toxin, slows heartbeat, freezes muscles, mimics death. Only a trained doctor could confirm life. And yet Dr. David signed her death certificate." All eyes swung to Dr. David. He broke. His shoulders slumped as sobs spilled out, words tumbling over themselves. I was forced. Williams threatened me. He said he would ruin me, destroy my hospital. I was afraid. I signed because I was afraid. Judith's eyes flared, her voice sharp as glass. Afraid? You let them put me in a coffin. You let them lower me into the earth. You betrayed your oath, and me. Dr. David covered his face, weeping openly. Forgive me, Judith. Forgive me. The prosecutor straightened. My lord, we have the poison. We have the syringe. We have the testimony of the victim herself. And we have the witness, the man who risked his life to stop the burial. Every gaze turned. Mr. Benjamin Okoro, the judge said firmly. Step forward. The court watched as Benjamin rose. His footsteps echoed in the chamber. At the stand, he swore the oath, his voice rough but steady. The prosecutor leaned in. Tell this court what you witnessed. Benjamin lifted his head, his eyes scanning the hall. His throat tightened, but when he spoke, the words carried like iron. The day before the burial, I was under the bridge where I sleep. I heard a car parked nearby. Two men argued inside, Williams and Dr. David. I heard Williams say, the poison worked. She is cold already. Tomorrow we bury her before anyone suspects. The doctor said he was scared, but Williams told him, do as I say, or you'll lose everything. A murmur rippled through the room. I knew then, Benjamin continued, voice breaking. If I didn't speak, they would bury her alive. I waited at the cemetery. When they brought her coffin, I begged them to stop. They called me mad, but I saw her fingers twitch. I couldn't let them lower her in. He paused, tears stinging his eyes. I lost my wife and daughter years ago. I was powerless then. Not this time. Not again. The silence was heavy, broken only by muffled sobs in the gallery. Judith pressed her hand against her lips, tears glistening. God bless you, Benjamin, she whispered. The defense attorney rose, sneering. And we are to trust the words of a beggar? A man who sleeps under bridges? How do we know he wasn't paid to spin this tale? Benjamin's jaw tightened. He stood taller, his shoulders broad despite the rags of his past. I may be poor. I may sleep on the streets. But I do not lie. I have nothing to gain, only the truth to give. The judge leaned forward, her gaze sharp. The witness has spoken with courage. His words will be weighed alongside the evidence. Williams slammed his fists on the table, his voice cracking with fury. He lies. They all lie. But even as his voice echoed, it rang hollow. The mask of grief had fallen. The world saw him now, not as a husband, but as a predator unmasked. And as Judith's trembling fingers sought Benjamin's hand in the front row, the crowd understood. This was not only the resurrection of a woman from the grave. It was the resurrection of a man long buried by life's cruelties. The trial of truth had begun, and neither Judith, nor Benjamin, nor Williams would leave unchanged. The trial stretched on like a storm that refused to pass. Each morning, the courthouse overflowed with reporters, business leaders, and ordinary people who had traveled miles just to witness the woman who had defied death. By evening, Judith's face filled the news. From grave to courtroom. Billionaire betrayal. Husband on trial. The homeless man who stopped death. Inside, the air was heavy. The world's eyes pressed in on Williams Anderson, once a man of charm and power. Now his suit was crumpled, his eyes bloodshot, his fists trembling. He looked less like a grieving husband and more like a beast in a cage, snarling whenever a witness dared to speak against him. Dr. David, however, shrank smaller with every passing day. His voice was a whisper, his shoulders hunched as though the weight of his betrayal pinned him down. Sometimes he muttered prayers, sometimes his hands shook so badly the guards had to steady him. On the fourth day, the prosecutor called Judith's driver, Chick, to the stand. A large man with steady eyes. He carried the weight of guilt on his broad shoulders. My lord, he began, his voice deep and firm. On the night Madame collapsed, I drove her to the hospital. She was struggling to breathe. But when we arrived, Dr. David ordered me to leave. He said he would handle it privately. I begged to stay. He refused. 2 hours later, he told us she was dead. The gallery gasped. Judith pressed her hands to her face, tears spilling as the memory clawed back. Chick bowed his head. I knew something was wrong. Madame was weak, but not gone. I should have fought harder. The prosecutor nodded grimly. So you confirm that Dr. David denied her any second opinion, insisting on isolation? Yes, sir. Chick answered, his voice breaking. The defense squirmed. Their story, like a fragile mask, was crumbling. Next came the toxicologist. He rolled out charts, diagrams, and a clear explanation. The compound found in the syringe is tetrodotoxin, he said. In small doses, it mimics death. The heartbeat slows, the muscles freeze, breath becomes too shallow to detect. Without advanced equipment, even a doctor could mistake life for death. This was deliberate. This was no accident. The room fell into silence. Every ear strained, every heart clenched. Finally, the judge turned toward Williams. Mr. Anderson, you have heard the charges, the testimony, the scientific proof. Do you have anything to say before this court passes judgment? Williams rose. Slowly, his body stiff, his face half fury, half despair. His voice cracked at first, but then swelled, bitter and sharp. Yes, I have something to say. The room leaned in. I loved Judith once, but she loved her empire more than me. Her billions, her power, it was always about her. What was I? A shadow in her home, a husband in name only. She treated me like a servant. So yes, I wanted it all. I wanted what was mine. If she had to die for me to live as a man, then so be it. Chaos erupted. Gasps, shouts, cries of outrage thundered across the hall. The judge slammed the gavel furiously. Order. Order in this court. Judith stood, trembling but strong. Her voice rose above the noise, cutting like a sword. You fool. Love is not stolen. Respect is not forced. You had everything, my trust, my home, my life. And still, you drowned yourself in greed. You tried to kill me, and now you have killed yourself. William's eyes blazed with madness. I regret nothing, he roared, trying to lunge across the dock. Guards restrained him, shackles rattling as he fought, screaming curses that rang hollow in the vast hall. Dr. David broke into sobs, collapsing to his knees in the dock. Forgive me, my lord. Forgive me, Judith. I betrayed everything I swore to protect. I deserve death. The gavel struck once more. The judge's voice rose, firm and merciless. This court has heard enough. Williams Anderson, you are guilty of attempted murder, conspiracy, and betrayal of the highest order. You are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment with hard labor. May your chains remind you of the life you tried to bury. Williams howled as guards dragged him away, his voice echoing. It should have been mine. All mine. The judge turned to Dr. David, her eyes sharp as steel. And you, Dr. David Afori, trusted with life, yet you dealt in death. Your betrayal of your oath is unforgivable. This court sentences you to life imprisonment as well. You will never again hold the life of another in your hands. Dr. David collapsed, sobbing as officers pulled him out. The gavel thundered. Court dismissed. For a heartbeat, silence clung to the walls. And then the room erupted. Some wept, others clapped, all buzzing with the weight of history. Judith sank into her seat, her body trembling with relief and exhaustion. She whispered, "It's over." But Benjamin, steady at her side, shook his head gently. "No, madam. It is only the beginning. You have your life again. What will you do with it?" She turned to him, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "I wouldn't be here without you. You saved me." Benjamin's voice was low, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I only did what I couldn't do before. I failed my wife and daughter years ago. But this time, I could not fail." Judith touched his hand, firm and warm. Her voice trembled. "You were my miracle." And around them, strangers who once ignored him reached out, shaking his hand, praising him. For the first time in years, Benjamin was no longer invisible. No longer a shadow under bridges. He was the man who stopped a burial. The man who saved a billionaire. But as Judith clung to his hand, both of them knew. This was only the first chapter of a story that had not yet finished writing itself. The heavy doors of the courthouse closed behind them. But Judith's life had only just reopened. For weeks, her mansion, once a place of mourning, became filled with voices, reporters begging for interviews, neighbors dropping by with flowers, employees lining the gates just to glimpse their resurrected boss. But Judith's eyes, though proud, carried a heaviness she could not shake. Nights left her restless. Sometimes she woke drenched in sweat, hearing again the suffocating silence of the coffin, the betrayal of the man she had loved. It was Benjamin's presence that steadied her. At first, He tried to retreat into the shadows of her estate. He kept to the servant quarters, offering to fetch files, carry papers, repair broken lamps. "Madam, let me be useful quietly," he murmured one evening as he stacked books in her study. But Judith shook her head, firm. "You gave me back my life. I will not let you fade into the background again." So she insisted he stay near her, not as a servant, but as someone she trusted. One evening after dinner, she invited him into her private study. The room smelled of old mahogany and leather, its walls lined with books. She poured 2 glasses of water, sliding one across the table. "Benjamin," she said softly, "you've carried something heavy for years. I see it in your eyes. Tell me." For a long moment, he stared at the glass. His hands shook. Finally, his voice broke the silence, low and rough. "I wasn't always like this," he confessed. "I was once a man with dignity, a software engineer, a husband, a father." His throat tightened, but everything collapsed. "I lost my job. My wife packed her things and left. She took my daughter, the little girl I had raised as my own. But she left me a note, telling me the child wasn't mine by blood." Judith's eyes widened, tears filling them. "That betrayal destroyed me," he whispered, pressing his palms together. "I wandered the streets, unable to breathe, unable to live. I slept under bridges because hope had abandoned me. Until that night, when I heard Williams speaking in his car about burying you. His words froze my blood. I couldn't let another life be stolen. Not again." The clock ticked softly in the study as silence spread between them. Then Judith reached across the desk, taking his trembling hand. Her voice was wet with tears. "You carried all that pain, and still you risked your life for me. Do you know what that means?" Benjamin's jaw quivered. "It means maybe I still have a reason to exist." From that night, something changed. Judith refused to let Benjamin slip back into obscurity. She began pulling him into her world, Anderson Holdings. At first, he only carried files, arranged schedules, organized reports. But soon, the quiet brilliance he tried to bury began to shine. One afternoon, during a high-stakes board meeting, panic broke out when a presentation file corrupted in front of international investors. The directors fumbled, sweat soaking their collars. Benjamin, standing by the corner, stepped forward quietly. Within minutes, he reprogrammed the system, restoring the slides with calm precision. Gasps filled the room. "Where did you learn that?" a director asked in disbelief. Benjamin hesitated. "I was once a software engineer, before everything fell apart." Judith's eyes softened, brimming with pride. She stood, her voice steady and resolute. "From today, Benjamin is no longer an assistant. He is my special advisor. His counsel will guide this company." The board exchanged looks, skeptical, surprised, but no one dared challenge the authority in her voice. For the first time in years, Benjamin stood tall. No longer a nameless wanderer, he was a man reborn. Anderson Holdings was never the same again. His sharp mind, disciplined by hardship, uncovered flaws in projects others overlooked. He guided investments with an intuition no numbers could capture. Judith watched in awe as employees began turning not only to her, but to him. In the evenings, she and Benjamin sat in the garden or study, speaking not of profits, but of life, grief, and second chances. His words were unpolished, but they cut deeper than polished speeches. She admired his honesty, his quiet wisdom. And for the first time since betrayal had shattered her heart, Judith felt something stir inside her chest. She did not admit it, not even to herself at first, but she longed for him. Longed not for the man the world now praised, but for the soul who had saved her in silence. Sometimes, when he laughed unexpectedly, she caught herself smiling too long. Sometimes, when his hand brushed hers while passing a file, her chest ached. But Benjamin never noticed. One afternoon, as they strolled through the garden, he spoke with unusual excitement. "Judith, I want you to meet someone. Her name is Juliana. She is kind, gentle. She makes me smile again." Judith froze. The smile on her face cracked, though she forced it back in place. Her chest felt heavy, as though all the air had been stolen. She had hoped, foolishly, perhaps, that he might one day see her. Not the billionaire, not the survivor, but the woman. Instead, he had given his heart elsewhere. That night, Judith cried quietly into her pillow. But when dawn came, she rose with new strength. If he could not be hers, then she would support his happiness. Months later, when Benjamin proposed to Juliana, it was Judith who insisted on sponsoring the wedding. "It is my honor," she told him with a smile that hid the bitter truth in her heart. The garden wedding was breathtaking. White roses, golden drapes, laughter flowing like music. Benjamin stood tall in a navy blue suit, his eyes glowing as Juliana walked toward him in her gown. Judith sat in the front row, clapping, her heart aching but at peace. As the vows were exchanged, she whispered to herself, "This is what he deserves: love, laughter, a new beginning." Her tears fell quietly, but they were not only of sorrow. They were of release. Because Judith knew, her story with Benjamin was not one of romance, but of redemption. And perhaps that was enough. Months after Benjamin's wedding, life surprised Judith as well. At a charity gala lit by warm lamps and soft laughter, she met George, calm-eyed, attentive, the kind of man who listened all the way to the end. He knew her headlines, yet refused to treat her like a headline. When people praised her towers, he asked if the elevators ever made her lonely. When someone mentioned the trial, he asked if she was sleeping through the night. He was not dazzled by power. He was careful with pain. Their dinners became walks. Their walks turned into long talks that ended only when dawn touched the sky. Judith found herself laughing in the middle of sentences, the way she used to before the coffin and the cold. George noticed the small things: how she folded napkins when nervous, how she checked the exits when rooms grew crowded, how her fingers searched for Benjamin at public events the way a diver reaches for air. He never forced her past her fear. He held her hand while she crossed it. One morning, in the quiet garden outside her study, George knelt. No orchestra, no speech, just a man with trembling hands and a steady gaze. "Judith," he said, "you owe nothing to anyone, not even to the past. But if you will let me, I will spend my life learning the weight of your joy." She did not know she was crying until she tasted salt. "Yes," she whispered, breath shivering, "yes." Their wedding was small, tender, and sunlit. Benjamin and Juliana sat in the front row. When Judith reached the altar, she glanced at them instinctively. Benjamin's smile held a fierce pride that did not hide its softness. Juliana reached for his hand and squeezed, and something in Judith's chest, an old ache, finally settled. The vows were simple. The kiss was gentle. The applause felt like rain on dry earth. A year later, life wrote itself in tiny hands. Benjamin and Juliana welcomed a son, Jonathan, bright-eyed, loud-lunged, a midnight singer who taught his parents new shapes of love. Not long after, Judith and George held their daughter, Aleliana, a small miracle who slept with one fist raised, as if arguing with dreams. On a golden evening, they gathered in Judith's garden. Benjamin rocked Jonathan. Judith pressed Aleliana to her chest and breathed the sweet, milky air above her hair. When their eyes met across the lawn, both were wet with gratitude. Benjamin raised a glass. "From ashes to dawn." Judith answered softly, "From ashes to dawn." Yet the story's shadow still had a name: Williams. Prison shaved him down to the bone. In the beginning, he cursed the walls, the guards, the judge, the calendar. Later he cursed only himself. Nights were deepest when memory replayed the cemetery. The slow rise of Judith's chest, the clatter of the syringe, the entire world turning against the lie he had told himself for years. Pride is a hunger that eats its owner. On a slab of metal called a bed, he learned that too late. He started to write. At first, the letters were stiff, excuses dressed as reasons. Slowly they softened. He admitted to greed, to envy, to the animal in him that called itself a man. "Judith," one letter read, "sometimes I dream I am standing by the open grave again, but this time I jump in first. Maybe that is justice." For months, Judith burned them without reading. Healing is stubborn. It refuses to be rushed. But grief and anger are stubborn, too, and they tire the body. On the 10th anniversary of the day a stranger stopped her burial, Judith decided her lungs deserved air. She planned an event to honor the miracle, an evening of soft lights, string music, and testimonies meant to outshout memory. She wore a simple dress. George stood at her right, Benjamin and Juliana at her left, the children in the front row, dressed like little questions mark, curious and bright. When the hall grew quiet, she stepped to the podium. Her voice did not tremble. 10 years ago, she said, I learned how thin the distance is between breath and silence. I also learned this. Hatred is another kind of coffin. I will not live inside it. Gasps fluttered through the audience before she spoke the next words. I forgive Williams Anderson. Some clapped immediately, others stared, stunned. A woman shook her head. A man stood to applaud. Judith lifted her hand and waited for the room to settle. Forgiveness is not forgetting, she said. It is remembering without letting bitterness drive the car. It is not the erasure of justice. It is the refusal to kneel to vengeance. If my life has any message left, it is this. Love writes the final paragraph. The cameras caught every syllable. The country argued all night. Talk shows, taxis, kitchens, bedsides. A few called her naive. Many called her brave. Judith turned off the television, kissed her sleeping daughter, and let her heart be tired in peace. Weeks later, Williams stepped out of prison. The sky looked too large. The road sounded too loud. He moved into a single room on the city's edge where the kettle hissed louder than memory. He worked day jobs no one bragged about and ate meals no one photographed. Sometimes he turned on the TV and watched Judith at ribbon cuttings and scholarship ceremonies. He touched the screen lightly when her daughter laughed. Greed destroyed me, he said to the empty room. Let my ruin be a warning. Judith never visited him. Mercy is not the same as reunion. But one afternoon, riding through a busy roundabout, her car paused at a light. On the corner, a thin man in a second-hand shirt waited with a paper bag. His profile was a familiar sentence. Judith did not lower the window. She folded her hands and said a prayer that had no words in it, only release. When the light turned green, the car moved. Some doors must remain closed so that the heart can stay open. Life did not pause for philosophy. It insisted on action. With Benjamin's counsel and George's quiet push, Judith built what pain had taught her to build. The Second Breath initiative brought mobile diagnostic vans to rural clinics, teaching nurses how to detect shallow vital signs and investing in equipment that refused to mistake life for death. The Anderson Trust for Ethical Medicine funded scholarships for doctors who promised to practice under a vow stricter than law. Truth before profit, patient before pressure. And in a corner of Lagos, a modest shelter of new names opened its doors to people who had been called less than human. On the plaque out front there were 3 words, from ashes, dawn. Benjamin cut the ribbon with hands that once shook under bridges. He gave speeches that sounded like conversations and conversations that felt like home. When the press called him the man who saved a billionaire, he smiled and said, "No, I saved a life." Titles come after breath. Sometimes, late, when the garden lights hummed like sleepy bees, Judith sat with Benjamin and George while the children played chase between hedges. They spoke about simple things, school projects, burnt toast, a tree that needed trimming. And then, in the spaces between, they spoke about the old emptiness and the new fullness, about how both were true and how both could be survived. "Do you ever wish the story had been different?" Benjamin asked once. Judith thought for a long moment. "I wish it had hurt less," she said. "But if it had, we might have learned less. I do not bless the betrayal. I bless what we built after it." A breeze moved through the leaves. Liliana ran across the lawn with Jonathan chasing and tripped into her mother's lap, laughing. Judith looked up at the sky, lavender tipping into gold, and felt the rare, quiet certainty that comes when the past stops tugging like a dog at the leash. She squeezed her daughter, held her longer than needed, and let the evening be enough. Because the truth was simple and complicated at once. The grave had not won. The heart had learned a new language. Dawn kept its promise. What came next would not be perfect, but it would be honest, and it would be theirs. What about you? If you were in Judith's shoes, would you have forgiven Williams? Where are you watching from? If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful, human stories every week.